Good day, students. Thank you and welcome to our presentation for Research Project Phase 2, that is Bes Rpp241. Speaking to you is Etuna Simon Ngifikwa. I am your research supervisor, and you can contact me on 081 085 266 3698, and you can drop me an email jetuna@gmail.com, and the best time to contact me is actually between 1700 hours to 2000 hours, but you feel free to contact me anytime. You just drop me an email and then I will attend to it. Okay, in this presentation today, we are going to look at some of the reflective thinking questions. Those are the questions that you need to think about as you take on your journey to your research project. And then we'll also particularly look at research project writing, project report guidelines, project layout, and also then references. Okay, to begin with, we will look at some of the important questions that you need to reflect on as you prepare for your project. Remember, by this time now, you should be done with your research proposal and you are starting with your project, whereby you have to visit the site, your research site, you are collecting data, and once you are done, you get into the whole process of data analysis, and then you need to prepare your report. So these are very important questions to consider. What topic will fit for the case under study? Remember, this can even be the same topic that you carry over from your research proposal, or you want to make few adjustments or amendments. This is the right time to do that. Is my topic relevant? You are reflecting, because these reflective questions actually help you to keep you on par, you see. So is it appropriate, and does it reflect the problem to be studied? Is it clearly stated? You ask yourself these questions. Do I have sufficient current literature available? Just some of the questions that you can ponder on. Then I would also just want to share with you some of the guidelines for project report. This is actually very important because most of our students normally just send same style, sort of like as a research proposal, but we are now at a stage of report writing, that is part of your project. You need to prepare a research report in your area of expertise or chosen topic. Remember what you have done in your proposal. You then got approved to go and carry out your project, right? Now you need to prepare the report. Ensure that your report is not more than 50 pages long. Ensure that it is typed. It uses Times New Roman font 12, line spacing 1.5, and also use the APA format for both in-text citations and the reference list. Do not just describe the content or contents of each subheading, rather describe the relevant information, how it was applied in your study, how applicable it is to your study. Make sure to read through your work and rectify all spelling and grammatical errors. I always tell my students, proofread your work. Ask a friend, ask a colleague, ask a peer to read through. Do peer review. Let somebody read through with you, and please make sure that you rectify all spelling and grammatical errors. Okay, in terms of the research project report, we are going to start with the layout, and we will actually begin with the title page. You see, normally students struggle with title page, and as you are drafting your report, ensure that you only include relevant information on the title page. At least there should be the name of the institution, that is the Institute of that is IOL, Institute of Learning. The faculty, our faculty of education and your specific course. It's not necessary to indicate the subject code. Indicate personal information, like for example your name, student number, very important. You don't need to focus on the course and subject code. It's also very important to indicate that the research is BESP, Bachelor of Senior Primary, okay? Topic and title of your project, very important. Don't exclude it out. And also table of contents. Most of the students struggle with this one. Table of contents, you are expected to generate that with Microsoft Word program. So don't type it, very important. Generate it. You first need to ensure that the headings actually formatted in your Word document. Then after, you can now generate the table of content. Okay, we are still busy with the research project report layout. The following proceeding sections should be presented before chapter 1. I know most students miss out on this, because then you always make a mistake. Already you are on chapter 1, but these are missing. So make sure that there is list of tables or figure where applicable. Very important. List of abbreviations and acronyms. Declaration. These are statements that you make. Dedication. To whom are you dedicating your report? Your project. Acknowledgement. Very important to acknowledge others. And also then your abstract should be presented before chapter 1, and then you can then have the table of content. You see, you need to generate it with the computer. So in terms of the research project layout, we are saying that it should be presented in several chapters. For example, you can have chapter 1, that is introduction. Chapter 2, literature review. Chapter 3, methodology. Chapter 4, results. Chapter 5, discussion of findings. Chapter 6, conclusion and recommendations. Appendix, very important. We want to see a list of appendices and then the references. So that is just an example of a layout of the report. If you feel like you only want to have up to chapter 5, you are welcome, as long as you make sure that chapter 4 then will address the result and the discussion thereof, and then chapter 5 would then address conclusion as well as recommendations. The abstract, it should actually give a summary of the whole report. If your readers are reading your abstract, they should already have an idea what your report is all about. It should outline the purpose, research method, findings, main conclusions, and recommendations. It must be presented mainly in the past tense and should be written last. So I normally tell students, once you compile your report, you can then summarize to develop your abstract, because you need to summarize it as per the purpose of your study, your research method, findings, for example, main conclusions, as well as recommendations. And it should be maximum, I always say 350 words. You don't need to do more than that, because it's a summary of the whole report. Very important. Let's start with chapter 1, that is introduction. There you are expected to outline context, background, and purpose of your study. You should actually present concise background of the study and define terms and set limits of the research. There you are also expected to, the reader or audience can easily, they should be able to identify what, how, and the why questions. You need to address those in the introduction as part of your chapter 1. This chapter mainly uses, also we say past tense, and can be written later, although presented first. So it depends on how you understand research project report. You see, you can either present it, normally we say it should be presented first, but it can also be written last, or later on in the study. But it's always very important to start with introduction so that you know what your study is all about, because here you are introducing your study and you are sort of like backing it up. We need to understand why your study. You back it up with literature, and you also tell us, sort of like give us a brief background of what has been done, you see, and then where do you place your study, because your readers or your audience, your readers actually need to understand what your study is all about. Very important questions to consider in chapter 1. You should consider the following questions. What will the result mean to practitioners in the natural settings of their workplace? Will the results influence programs, methods, or forms of intervention? How might the result contribute to the solution of social, economic, or other types of problems? So we need to understand, like for example, in the current situation where we are of COVID-19, when you are doing your study, we want to understand how it can also contribute to the solution of this current economical or social problem that we are facing. Will the result influence policy decisions? In what way do individuals or groups benefit from your study? So we need to know. And all these questions, you can actually address them in chapter 1. So you need to have that important information there. We are not saying present it in question types, but we are saying you should make an attempt to answer these questions as you are compiling your report. Have these questions at the back of your mind. What will be improved or changed as a result of the project? You see, we need that to come out. We continue with chapter 1. Ensure that you are not reinventing the wheel. Remember, we build from previous studies. Okay? Gives credit to those who have laid the groundwork for your project. Hence, we are urging you to credit source of information and also make reference to previously conducted research or studies in the field. Demonstrate your knowledge of the research problem. You do it in chapter 1, and throughout, as you are writing your report, you should also demonstrate your understanding of the theoretical and research issues related to your research question. Very important as well. Okay? And be able to identify the key independent and dependent variables of your experiment, especially for those who are doing a quantitative research study. Alternatively, specify the phenomenon of your study. You see? As in the case of qualitative research. State your hypothesis or theory, if any. For exploratory or phenomenological research, you may not have any hypothesis. Please do not confuse a hypothesis with a statistical null hypothesis as well. So, need to know the difference and where to apply which one. Set the delimitation or boundaries of your research in order to provide a clear focus. Very important that you set delimitation, boundaries of your study. We need to know what are the, inclusions and exclusions of your study, and provide definitions of key concepts. This is particularly important because this is actually your opportunity to indicate to your readers how they should understand specific terms or concepts in your study. You see? That is actually very important. We are then now moving on to literature review. That is chapter 2. This chapter is particularly also very important. Is all the chapters in your research report. And here you are actually expected to have an understanding of the literature review. that serve several important functions. Theoretical conceptual framework that underpins the study you need to come out. Was your study did your study adopt or adapt a theoretical framework, or was it a conceptual framework? Which one? What was it that underpins the study, that particular study? Ensures that you are not reinventing the wheel. That is also very important. Remember, you are doing a review of the literature. You are reviewing literature. You need to look at what has been done and you review that. Then you compile what we call a literature review for your particular study. Do not copy and paste what other people said. In most cases, try by all means to paraphrase here. Here we want to hear your voice. Your voice as a writer should come out. You should give credit to those who have laid the groundwork for your project. You should refer to previously conducted studies and credit those, the source of information, demonstrate your knowledge of a research problem. We need to understand that you really understand the research problem. You demonstrate it here as well. Now, as we continue with literature review, to help frame your literature review, consider the 5 C's of writing a literature review. The first C we are going to refer to is cite. Cite to keep the primary focus on the literature pertinent to your research problem. Very important. And in terms of the second C is compare the various arguments, theories, methodologies, and findings expressed in the literature. Very important to do a comparative analysis of that. Then the other C, the third C, that is contrast the various arguments, themes, methodologies, approaches, and controversies expressed in the literature. And also the fourth C, that is critique. You need to be able to critique the literature. Which arguments are more persuasive and why? Which approaches, findings, methodologies seem most reliable, valid, or appropriate, and why? You see? And then last but not least, the last C is connect. There you need to connect the literature to your own area of research and investigation. So that is actually very important. You should be able to connect and also continue with that. You should be able to show your ability to critically evaluate relevant literature information and indicates your ability to integrate and synthesize the existing literature. So you see there you demonstrate actually your skills as a writer. You need to demonstrate that you are able to integrate and synthesize the existing literature, because you are not merely copying and pasting, but you are critically, analyzing the relevant literature as you present it. You present that review. We want that to come out, and you should also be able to provide new theoretical insight or develops a new model as a conceptual framework, for example, for your project. So I want to see those ones coming out. Okay, excuse me. Be able to convince your reader that your research will make a significant and substantial contribution to the literature. Example, resolving an important theoretical issue or filling a major gap in the literature. You see, we want to know what is your contribution to the body of knowledge. Are you going to resolve an important theoretical issue? Are you filling major gaps in the literature? What are you contributing? Are you developing a new model, for example? Are you developing a framework? What it is? What is your contribution? This need to come out, and you can only determine that as you are reviewing the literature. Okay. What are some of the common problems in the literature review? Most students' literature reviews suffer from the following problems: lacking organization and structure, lacking focus, unity and coherence, being repetitive and verbose. You are just repeating things. You address one thing at a time and then you move on to the next. Failing to cite influential papers. You are just citing, but it's not really influential. Focus on the important, like I say, identify the experts in the field. Failing to keep up with recent developments, failing to critically evaluate cited papers, citing irrelevant or trivial references, just anything and everything you want to paste it in your study. You must make sure that it is relevant to your study. Depending too much on secondary sources, please, you are encouraged to make use of primary sources to build up the literature, review. Then we are actually going to move over to chapter 3, that is methodology. Remember, we are going to talk about 6 chapters. We are now in our 3rd chapter. We still have chapter 4 and chapter 5 as well as 6 to talk about. So we will start with chapter 3, that is now methodology. Here you should indicate the research method you use. If it is qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods, you need to make a choice there and make sure that it is clearly stated in the beginning as you are presenting your chapter. Cite from research books where applicable. This is mostly advice or encourage. You need to cite research books when it comes to chapter 3. No method is perfect, so acknowledge how you collected data. We want to understand how you collected your data. Indicate the approach used. Was it case study, example, multiple case study, or was it experimental? Explain instruments and relevance during the data collection. Present how data were collected and analyzed, as well as you need to pay attention to what we call ethical considerations. In terms of chapter 4, there is a result of findings. Here you should present your findings. I always tell my students, present the raw data. How you find out, whatever it is that you find out, present it there. If you are presenting it in a table form or graphs, it depends on your study, or you are also then, indicating them in terms of verbatim. So however it is, we just want to see direct quotation from the respondents. Depending on the research method used, present findings of the research, facts only, no interpretations. Just present the raw data. That's all we want to see there. Uses, you can use graphic form, for example, tables and graphs. For qualitative studies, use direct quotations from respondents. Is actually advisable to do this so that we can really see that what your respondents have said. We don't want you to influence what they have said there. We just want to read the findings. Later on, you can bring in the interpretation. That is a different chapter where you will then discuss the findings and we will talk about it in this presentation as well. We are actually then right there, chapter 5, discussion. Now that you have presented the data and the findings, you then need to discuss such findings in relation to the literature. So present an interpretation and evaluation of the results. So you are actually interpreting now what it is that you have found out. Analyze results. You need to draws together different aspects of the findings of other studies and refers to literature. Very important to relate whatever it is to the literature. We are saying cite the relevant literature as presented in chapter 2 to support your findings. Compare with your arguments. Are the findings in line with the literature? Are there some agreements? Are there some disagreements? And what are those agreements and what are those disagreements? So that need to come out clearly. present a summary of findings. And as we continue with chapter 5, you are also expected to draw some conclusions there. Brief statement of what was found, very important. I always say before you move to the conclusion, I want to see a summary there. Summary of findings, it means you are summarizing the findings now. I want to see summary there before you move over to conclusion. So there you briefly, present a statement of what was found, why the study should be done, and the specific purpose of the study and the research questions in an attempt to answer, which were those questions. So you need to come out clearly. Then the decisions as to why the research design and methods used were chosen over other options. So you are sort of like backing up your study now. Why those methods? Why were they relevant to your study? The potential implications emerging from your study of the research problem that should also come out, and a sense of how your study fits within the broader context about the research problem need to come out clearly. You see, that is where you address that when you are drawing conclusions. Remember, conclusions are drawn from the findings. So you need to draw conclusions. Okay, then chapter 6, for those who are opting to go for the 6 chapters route, if you feel like to end at chapter 5, you then ensure that chapter 4 include the discussion of findings. So you then discuss your findings. Once you present a finding, then at the bottom you discuss, so forth and so forth. Then you can have your chapter 5 as a recommendation, conclusion, recommendation, and future research, for example. So then if you are taking the 6 chapters route, you then here address how will the result of the study be implemented, what innovations that come about, what suggestions for subsequent research that arise from the potential outcomes of the study, suggest suitable changes or solutions, for example, recommendations for practice in future research that need to come out. Like, for example, I'm just giving you examples of how recommendations should appear. These were extracted from a study that I conducted in 2014. Teachers must be encouraged to develop lesson plans that reflect the motive of ICT use and integration. Research is needed. This is an example of future research. So the finding, the recommendation is such that research is needed in other educational regions to complete the view of ICT use in Namibian schools. You see, so your recommendations should be drawn in that context. That is how you frame it. And then, as I indicated earlier, you should also have appendices. These are attachments of additional information, for example, surveys, questionnaires, glossaries, etc., permission letters, instruments used, for example, interview schedule and observation guide. So you then attach them at the end as your appendices. You can number them as Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, etc., etc. And then our references, all references you should be presented. Make sure that you present them, and then there must be, there should be line spacing of 1.0 just for references, very important, and align them correctly and present in an APA referencing style. For example, if you see a reference there, Simon WE 2019, as you see there, make sure the A is in bracket, full stop, evaluation of the implementation of online formative assessment at higher education institution. If it's not published, if it was just a thesis, then you can say unpublished doctoral thesis, University of Pretoria. That is just a very good example for you to see. And then if it's published, then you can now indicate where it is published, so which means you then have the name of the journal where it was published. So the same goes as you are referencing, for example, a textbook like that one of Yin, 2009 case study research, design and method. So very important, you need to know the type of information to include as you are compiling your reference list. They need to be the name of the author, the year, the topic or title. For example, most books, if it has 2 titles, you know how to separate it. You need to indicate the edition and then the place of publication. So very important, the country and then the publishers. Okay, very important there. These are also some of the links that you can visit just to get more information on how to compile your research project report, and also how to understand, how to carry out a research project before you get into the field. There are very important things that you need to take note of so that you will know what to go look for. And you should also be, you should have your instruments handy because you will use them to collect data. Okay, before I can say we are at the end of the presentation, I would just want to actually touch base on the whole, layout of the research project in a nutshell. Okay, so when you are compiling your research project report, it is actually very important to pay attention, to those chapters. I don't want to read now section in the research report. We are now talking about chapters. You see the difference between proposal and report. There you are now writing it. You must present your report always in past tense because we assume you have carried out this project. Now you are reporting back on what you have done. You see the difference between proposal and report is that with regard to proposal, you are proposing what you are going to do. But when it comes to report, research report, you are then reporting on what you have done. So it should be presented in past tense. That is very important. And you should have maximum of 50 pages at least. Font size 12, font times New Roman, very important, line spacing 1.5. Align your report correctly. Use a correct format. The paragraph should be well aligned. We don't want to see one sentence is ending here, the other one is beginning there. So please make sure that your report is concise, also to the point, and you should make use of academic writing to present, your report. You don't write it as you are talking. So there's a difference. And avoid, I always tell my students to avoid completing a report that is not coherent. There must be a flow from the beginning. From chapter 1, if your readers are reading through your report, there must be a link from the beginning to the end. Then I'm still busy with the same report. There must be a link there. So get yourself research books, very important. Always read, make time to do your project well on time, and just dedicate, even if it's just an hour or 2 hours for your project per day. You will make progress. Don't wait until the deadline, until the due date when you need to submit. That is when you want to complete. And please avoid copying from other people's previously done studies. So having said that, I should actually congratulate you once more for making it to this stage that you are now busy with your research project, and I'm looking forward to reviewing your final report and provide you with specific comments to help you also as you are compiling your final report before we can actually grade it. And thank you for your time, and all the best with your research project. Thank you.